I think I shared a couple times here. My wife came one of the times that I have the opportunity to come back here, and we tried for like about 9 years to have kids, and the Lord keeps saying to us that He promised to us to have a family, but we passed through a lot of obstacles, a lot of circumstances, and after almost 10 years, we have a first girl. Her name is Genesis, and she came through a lot of process of surgeries and medicine and all. It was just too much to handle. And then we thought that was the miracle that God had for us. And then no more than 1 year, Shannon got pregnant again. And that was just another miracle, because the doctor said, like, that's the only way that you can have kids, is do the whole same thing that we did with Genesis. And then passed just another year, and then we have the third one there. And it was like God just keep blessing us year after year. And then my wife, it was like, do you want to have another one? And it was like, well, I probably need to pray, because 3 is getting too much. And there are three girls. So I'm completely outnumbered in my house. And then she said, like, well, we probably can try maybe a 4th one, and we have a boy. And it was like, with my luck, it's going to be probably another girl. And with my luck, it might be twins, and it will be all girls. And he was like, I don't think we can handle that at this point. But it's been really, really good. God has blessed us in the last few years with my family, with Shannon, in every aspect of life. Like, He's been present in every single step that we had to take. Like, He's been there with us. And in the aspect of family, and the aspect of work, and the aspect of finances, and the aspect of just family, anything that we kind of go, we can see His fingerprints. We can see that He is there with us, because that's what He promised. He said that I'm going to be with you no matter where you go. Amen to that? Amen. Now, He didn't promise that everything was going to be like easy. He didn't say that He's like, oh, as soon as you say that I'm your God, then you're good. Like, it's going to be so easy. No, He didn't say that. But He said that every single time, no matter if it's easy, it's hard, if it's difficult, He is going to be with us. That's His promise. And I'm here to tell you that that is true, because I have lived it. I've been in the midst of really hard circumstances, and I can feel His presence. I've been in the midst of joy in my life, and then I feel His presence. And I was just very encouraged with your testimony this morning. Because sometimes we hear the stories of like missionaries, and we hear stories of God doing like amazing things that has happened in Africa, or like in other parts of the world, or maybe right now you hear stories coming from testimony from the Ukraine, and all the stuff that you hear God doing. But sometimes we don't hear what God is doing here with our neighbors, with our families. And as the time passes, sometimes I start to doubt even if God is still doing stuff like that. And I'm so glad that we have testimonies today. Today, not just years past, not somebody that happened like 100 years ago, somebody that died 50 years ago. Today, we can actually speak about what God is doing in the life of the people that we know. Now, you have a testimony right now because you know Him, you know His family, that you can say to other people, you know, I know somebody that God actually spoke to him and woke up at 3 in the morning and said, pray for your family because this could happen. And then he got up and prayed, and we see the hand of God in that circumstance. How many times you go through something in your life and you're looking just for like little hope that can get you through? He said that He is the hope of glory. He is your hope. And for me to hear the testimony this morning, it gives me hope that maybe this afternoon or maybe tomorrow I'm going to be for something that is kind of hard, but I'm going to remember. I remember that God is still living, and I remember that God is still active today, because I just heard that He did something with somebody that I know. Amen? Amen. So that's not what I'm preaching. That's just like a little a little appetizer. That's for free. I'm not going to charge you for that one. But I'm looking forward all the time. Every year I'm looking forward to come back here. Every time I'm looking forward to see the message and say like, hey, can you come and preach on these days? Because this place is special. It was a transition in my life. I came from another country. Like, I didn't have a lot of people around me. I had my wife and his family. And it was so many things going on in my life. And God brought me to that front bench. And he said, like, you pray. And I didn't know anything. I didn't know this area. I didn't know that there was a church here. I didn't know nothing. And I felt kind of strange just walking into a church with nobody there and just pray. So this place is special in my heart. Because he was talking to me the same way they talk to you. The same way that he woke up in the morning. The same way that sometimes you hear or feel his presence in your house. And sometimes you discount it. Or sometimes like, well, that was weird. Like the same way I felt like he was talking to me. And when I was driving in that road, he said like, turn left. There's a church there. Go inside and pray. And you might think that's a little bit crazy, but I have news for you. I am a little bit crazy. I am. And that's the reason that probably more than 10 years now that happens. I'm standing here today trying to tell you that God still has something for your life. Trying to tell you that you're not forgotten. And you might say like, well, I might come back here every Sunday and I don't hear, or I don't feel him, or I don't have the experience that you have. I don't have a voice that tell me to go to that road. I don't have nobody to work me in the train 3 in the morning. And I'm telling you, with all the certainty that I have in my heart, that God is still talking to you. That he's not given up, that he's not forgotten, that he's still active and he's still trying to do something through you. Not just to you, but through you. So, I have a story this morning as I was preparing, like I was hearing different things that I was learning for myself, and I came through this story, and it's kind of like a strange story. And how many of you guys, every time that you read the Bible, if you read the Bible, and if you don't, I recommend it to do it. I'm not that good at it, but I sometimes pick it up. If you read the Bible and I start reading, then I start to come across with these just like bizarre, strange stories. Like it's especially the Old Testament, they're full of like really, really interesting stories that you kind of ended up scratching your head. It's like, I don't understand anything that was going on. And then this was one of those stories. And if you have your Bibles there, I would like you to try to go with me. We're going to read just a little bit and we're going to talk about this story. But this story is found on 2 Kings chapter 13. Talks about a little bit about Elijah. And you familiar with him? If not, I'm going to try to give you a little bit of context so you can understand what's going on that time. So 2 Kings chapter 13. We're going to start, I believe it's like around verse 17. Hope you have it there. So before we start reading, I will give you a little bit of context. So there was a king of Israel, and in that time, the king of Israel, it was literally in war. It was a lot of the towns around it, a lot of the people around it, they were coming really, really heavy on the people of God, on Israel. And Israel had like a history of like, it had a king over his people, but they were not really good and follow God's instruction. Like God would say to them, like, this is the stuff that you have to do. And the king will go there and start to mess up. Start to kind of get lazy and start to worship other gods. And start to do things that they were not pleasing into God's eyes. How many of you guys can raise your hand and say like, sometimes I do things that I think they're not the right thing to do in God's eyes? I'm the first one. And if you didn't raise your hand, I want to meet you. So I think you will be special. Right? So the people of Israel, it was kind of in that place. And the king would die, and they would raise up another king, and everybody will have the hopes, they will follow what God directions, and then they will continue falling short of what God said to them that they needed to do. So that was kind of like the background. And Elijah was a prophet from God to the people of Israel. And the prophet on that time, it was that person that it was in charge to communicate to the people, to the king, what is the stuff that God was saying that they needed to do? What are the things that they needed to do so God can be pleased with his people? So the prophet would come and God would direct through him, and he would be the mediator to communicate to his people. So Elijah was a prophet, and this time the king of Israel, they were going through very, very difficult times. And Elijah the prophet was about to die, and the king decided to go and visit him. And then this is where we come up on verse 17. 2 Kings chapter 13, verse 17. And he started, and Elisha said to the king, "Open the east window." Say that with me. Open the east window. You're glad that God sometimes is really specific in his instructions? I don't know what the room will look like in that time, but just the fact that the prophet say, open the east window, I can't imagine that there were more windows than just one. There was probably the north, the south, the east, and the west, or at least another window back there. It is interesting that sometimes God will not open the window for you, but it tells you what you need to do. It is interesting that sometimes we're waiting for God to do everything for us, and he keeps giving us instructions, little pieces, to see if we can actually do the things that he's asking us to do. So he started with a little bit instruction and said, open the east window, he said. And the king opened it up. So the context of this story, and I'm going to tell you my side of the story. Elijah say, and this is not an archery and hunting lesson, because I'm the less person to teach you anything about that, because I don't do anything of that. But the prophet said to the king, bring some bow and some arrows. Come to the window back here. Bring some bows, a bow and an arrow. And he said, I want you to actually shoot to the east window, facing the camp that it was called Aram, which he was the enemy of the people of Israel. He said there, for your reference, on verse 15, Elisha said, get a bow and some arrows, and he did. Take a bow in your hands, he said to the king of Israel. Then he had taken it, and Elijah put his hand on the king's hand. Then we come to verse 17. And Elijah said, shoot the arrow through the window. And Elijah proclaimed, the Lord arrow of victory, the arrow of victory over Aram. Elijah declared, you will completely destroy the Arameans and Ephraim. So if you were me, and sometimes when I try to read the Bible, I'm trying to picture it in my mind to try to keep it understand. So I'm the king of Israel, I'm with the prophet. The prophet asked for a bow and an arrow. Weird, right? And then he said, I want you to open the east window facing where the enemy is. And I start to think about it, sometimes in our life, God actually doesn't want you to run against the enemy. He say, I need you to open specific window because I want to face that thing face forward. He said, don't think or ignore the things that are happening in your life and just turn against them and just act like if nothing has happened. Sometimes there's things that they're really hard in our life, and God say, I want you to face that way, and I want you to take the arrow of victory, and I want you to shoot at it. Straight to where the things are hard. because He promised to be with you. How many of you guys familiar with the Ephesians part of the Bible that it talks about the armor of God and say, put the armor of God? How many of you guys read that part of the story of the Bible? Have you ever thought that it was nothing covering the back? It's kind of difficult when you go to a fight, and if you turn your back and there's nothing to cover you, you're pretty much losing. When I start to think about that way, God always wants you to move forward even when it's the most difficult task in your life. Because He's going to be there to protect you. He said that He has the chest and the belt and the sandals. And if you imagine somebody in that time, everything is covered when you coming forward with the enemy. And He is behind you. He is protecting you. So I want you to think about a little bit this story of how God was interacting with the king of Israel. Now, verse 18, then he said, take the arrows, and the king took them, and Elijah struck the ground, and he struck it 3 times and stopped. Say with me, stop. Stop. Say with me again, stop. Stop. So God already declared victory over the enemy. He said, take the arrow, shoot it. And the prophet said, I declare the victory of the Lord over you. And then he said, that's how it opens verse 18. And then he says, sometimes when God tells you a promise, you think that you don't have to do anything else. When God said to do something, you think that you can take your hands out and say like, okay, God is saying that to me, I don't have to do anything else. When He woke up at 3 in the morning, He did not wake you up just to like go ahead and take a glass of milk in the kitchen and then come back and go to sleep. Sometimes we had to do that extra step. Sometimes when He called your attention and make you a promise for your life, then He starts to giving you instructions of what you have to do. He said, I declare victory over you. And then He said, take the arrows, they're there. He's going to give you a little bit of instruction. So everybody in their life, you either have an arrow or you either have an errand camp against you. And I want you to think where you are in your life. Are you focusing on the enemy, on the stuff that is coming at you? Or you actually focusing on what God is telling you to do and you have the arrow ready to shoot? Everybody has the potential to be in either or place. You either can spend your time just trying to see what everything that is coming to you, or you can see the potential that God has put it in your hands and say like, what are you going to do with that? And when you use it, He starts to declare the victory over you, and then He starts to give you instructions of what you have to do. Now, I don't know about you, I was thinking this morning, there are some things that I'm not good at it. There's some things that I try to do and it just like try to do again, and it's like find myself that that's not my skill. That's not the potential that God has given me to do. Now there are other things that I'm really good, and I try to look for things to do in that way because I feel accomplished. I feel like I do something. And I feel like I have potential to grow. And I remember even, like, I always liked music. And I was really kind of easy to pick it up like an instrument and then just kind of like play with it. And I learned like drums and bass. And There were all this stuff, even in the music area, that it was like, that's just not me. Like, I tried piano for a long time, and just like my fingers didn't quite, which is weird because I can play the bass, but piano, I just couldn't. And I remember that, like, some people would come to me and say, like, oh, you have potential to be there, but it was like annoying me because, like, I don't like that. I know that I have potential, but I'm good at that stuff, but I'm not good at that. But there's something that I learned in the walk with God is that even if I find something that I'm not good at it, I'm going to give it 100%. And I'm going to put everything, we say now, everything on the court. I'm going to leave everything out there and going to do anything that I can to follow what my heart is saying and to follow what God is doing to me. I remember, actually it was like a few days before we have a first daughter. Like, I'm not into exercise and anything in that way, and I have a friend that is really good. And he said to me, like, hey, I can come to your house and we can lift up some weight and we can like start working out. And I was kind of like inside of me, like, I really like this friend, and it was like, it would be good to kind of spend time, but I'm not the type that kind of do a lot of exercise and lifting, and you can see for that myself. I like food. That is my workout. I can eat all the time, but doing exercise, not my thing. But he was really persistent, and I was like, okay, I can probably work with him a little bit. It has been years since I didn't work out. So we were working in my basement. Literally the night before, we would go to the hospital for my first little girl to be born, and he was kind of like putting the weights, and we were lifting, and we were curl ups, and literally I couldn't do it. He put more weights, and I was trying to, with everything that I could, to try to lift it out of the way, shaking, and it was awful. But I give everything that I have, literally. Like, it was to the point that I was actually even feeling sick, like dizzy, and like cold sweating, and it was just because I just want to hang out with a friend, and I hate doing some workout and everything, but I give everything that I have. I put everything on the court. I didn't leave anything behind. And by the end of the day, I felt pretty good. It was like I did some stuff, and I don't know if you're like me, but after I work out, then you go to the mirror and you start to see if you see any difference after one day, which of course not. It doesn't work that way. But the funny thing is that the next day we were in the hospital, and I'm kidding you not, I could not move my arms. Literally, I could not even put it down, or I could not even bend out. I couldn't even drive to the hospital because I had to do these, and it hurt so much. And I was walking in the hospital hallways with my wife like these because I had so much pain in my arms for working out. And something in my head, it was kind of like, that's all your fault. You could have faked it a little bit, take a couple weights and pretend that you were doing it, but no, you had to give it all in. You had to try to do as much weight possible to do it, and you didn't stop. And you keep going, and you didn't stop. And he was like, is that your fault? So this is a part of the story that I want you to take with you this morning. This is the stuff that when I was reading, it just hit me really, really profound in my heart. Because it says, the king told him, strike the ground 3 times. Strike the ground. And then the king went and struck the ground 3 times and stopped. And then he said, the man of God was angry with him and said, you should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times, and then you would have defeated the Aram and completely destroy it. But now you will defeat it only 3 times. Now, I don't know how many arrows the king had, but the prophet says struck the ground back there. And I like to think about that he took maybe 1 arrow and start tricking a bunch of times. So maybe he took just 3 arrows and struck the ground 3 times. And the man of God got angry and said, like, why you only struck it 3 times? Because not only you're going to defeat them 3 times, but you're actually going to lose the rest. And the sad part for me is that if you remember just a couple verses before, God already declared the victory over the enemy. So, think about it with me a little bit. There's some things that God is going to tell you that you're going to have victory over it, but sometimes depends what you do. It has a condition inside to see how much victory you're going to have. How much actually you put in on the court. Are you giving it everything that's inside of you? And I feel like the king had more arrows with him, but he only used 3. And the prophet said, why you didn't use 5 or 6 or 10 or 12 or whatever is there? Because he was trying to see if the king can use everything that he has. And the question that God asked me yesterday and this morning is, are you giving me everything that you have? Are you using all the arrows that are available for you? Or are you just using enough and then stopping? And I want to challenge you this morning. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how young you are. When God puts something in you, are you giving it all? And you can tell me, well, yeah, you try to separate the spiritual aspect and not. Let's take it in a bigger aspect. If you're young and you're in school, and high school and university, or you're at work already, and you're working, or you're doing a project, or you have your own business, or you're just an employee, whatever your life circumstances is right now, are you giving it all completely? Because I believe that God has put you wherever you are for a reason. And He's actually telling you, hey, I'm going to put you in front of the east window where your enemies are, and I'm going to give you the victory, but I need you to do certain things. And the condition is if you see full victories because you're giving it all, or you're starting and then stopping. And that's the reason why the prophet got angry with the king. He said he got angry and said, like, why you only use 3 when you have 6? Why are you coming short? I better myself, I would feel a lot better if I give it all I have and find that it was not enough than actually stopping short and wonder, what if? And you might think like, hey, my years are past. I already did a bunch of stuff. I did my part. And God is telling you, you still have some arrows that you have not used. You have seen me win some victories for you. You still have some arrows in your back. There's still some things to come. And I need you to understand that you need to give Him it all completely. And when I hear God saying that, it really got me concerned for myself. Then I start to think about it, that there's some areas that I'm not giving it all. That I'm not giving it all in my family. That I'm treating my wife not as the way that He's telling me. That I'm not raising my kids the way that He's telling me. That I'm not investing enough in myself to be a better person. That I'm not continue listening to hear His voice. That I'm a good worker. That I'm a good boss. That I'm a good friend. Like, what is the areas in your life that you still have some arrows and God is waiting for you to get ready because there's some things that still can get better for you? Are you giving it all to God? Are you using everything that is available that God has given to you? And if you're not, the good news is that the window is still open. The good news is that God is still showing you where you had to make an impact. The good news is that God is still actually telling you, and I'm pretty sure that I'm talking to you, there's some of you guys that has something inside your heart that is starting to think like, I feel like God is saying something about that area, and I still need to do better. I don't know you, I don't know what area, I don't know what you do, but I'm pretty sure that the Holy Spirit right now is going through these pews and is making something inside your heart and is catching something that I'm saying that is like, you still have some arrows in your back. It is not late. You still can make an impact. You still can be a better person. You still can be a better husband. You still can be a better family. You still can be a better employer. You still can be a better friend. There's so many things that God has put in front of us and said, are you doing what I tell you to do, and that you're leaving it all? Are you walking in the halls of life with the arms like that because you're giving it all? Are you walking in the aspect of your family that you're actually carrying some bruises and you sore of the work that you actually put in for your family? Or are you just walking in life, stopping short for what God is calling you? And you maybe be nice one day and then you stop. Took one arrow and then stop. And you maybe were really, really conscious and trying to be a good person, but the next car that passed and flipped you off, then you got really mad. And then you stop being nice. Because it's really easy to be nice when people are nice to you, but they're not easy to be nice when people are mad to you. That you're trying to be a good family member, but then suddenly your son or your husband say something mean to you, and then something comes inside you and you react in a way that you know that it was not right, and then you stop. How much is inside you that you need to give it all? And I see that to myself. I prefer to come to God and say like, God, it is all in. This is all I have. If you want me to do more, you should give me more. But this is everything that you ask me to do, I'm going to put it all on the court. I'm going to use whatever arrows you're giving me, and I'm going to keep using. And I keep striking the ground, and I keep striking the ground until I can see your victory over me and over the enemy. So I want to finish tonight. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the whole Elijah life. He asked for a double portion of his mentor. Right? You guys familiar with that? Elijah the prophet. He got a mentor, and then